Good morning. Today is Friday, August 16, 2019. Commissioners Court is meeting in special open session. Item number 2 from the regular agenda. Discuss and take appropriate action on the fiscal year 2019 through 2020 budget for the County of El Paso, Texas. Item number 3, pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code Section 152.013B, discuss and take action on the proposed annual salaries, expenses, or allowances for elected county and precinct officers for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2019. Any proposed salary or allowance increases will be published in a local newspaper of general circulation. These salaries and any proposed increases will take effect on October 1st, 2019, and upon the adoption of the county budget.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, Judge. Good morning, Commissioners. We have a few items left to go over from our register. I didn't know, before we get started, there's a couple of things I wanted to check with you on. We didn't know if you all thought we would go beyond lunch break today. So we were debating whether to bring in food for lunch or not. Just wanted to kind of get a feel from you all.
I think how long do you think we're gonna run? You said you think we'll be done before lunch?
It depends on how much conversation we have. Yesterday, I understand after I left, there was discussion about changing the wage adjustment. I didn't know if there was a consensus amongst the court on that issue. We also need to discuss and affirm, you previously indicated you were gonna go with option 2 on the judicial pay plan, but you did not vote finally on that or give clear final direction on that. So we need to confirm that. And then we have the capital fund transfer amount still for further discussion. So, I don't know if you all have kind of thought about it overnight and you have a more definitive.
Well, I think on the option, I almost thought that we had voted on it, but there wasn't kind of consensus. But I think that one should be something we should consider. I think that's the closest to
A definitive decision?
Definitive, because we actually told them that we were inclined, so I think that one, I don't know, would that be our first discussion?
My first thoughts are bring in lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're not gonna finish.
Okay,
Let's not kill ourselves.
We'll just be on the safe side too.
Yes, sir. I kind of thought we might go that way,
We
so.
finish, it can be a celebration.
There you go.
Stay optimistic.
Okay,
First
perfect.
food and then we'll figure everything out. Okay.
Yes, okay, perfect. And then, so would you like to start, I know that there are some individuals here who'd like to talk about the wage adjustment as well. And I will tell you, I became aware about the wage adjustment yesterday because I was starting to get contacted individuals concerned about where we were gonna go with that. But I know the attorneys would like to speak about the pay plan for the attorneys. If you think we're not going to follow the proposed attorney scale. And then I don't know if you want to do that first or if you want to do the judiciary first.
Well, like I said, I think the closest
Easiest-
one we were there.
The easier one would be the judiciary, right?
Yeah. I think we pretty much agreed on that.
Judge, may I say, I mean, something I was thinking about last night, and I was mentioning this to Wally this morning, is again, my overall concern and something I hope we give consideration to. It's always been the gap between our expenditures and our revenues, and I think where we stand right now, I think speaking to Wally, there's about a $12 million gap where we're proposing to spend $12 million more than what we're actually bringing in, and as then and on top of that, we're just lowering our reserve fund down to 10%, where previously we've had a 15% policy. That's just always been my concern. Is to me it's a little irresponsible for us to leave such a large gap or try not to close it to the extent possible, because it's only going to put increasing pressure on us next year, especially if we're depending on essentially a savings account to make up for that difference. And so that's why looking at the wage expense that we have to go through today, that alone accounts for a $10 million recurring expense that we're putting on our budget. And so that's the only thing that sort of kept me up a little bit, and trying to figure out other areas You know, I don't know if
Half
it-
of it's the sheriff's,
Right.
the sheriff's, so we can't,
right.
there's nothing we can do about that.
Right, but we're sort of doubling, more than doubling that, you know, with the wage proposal. You know, I don't know if there could be other considerations in terms of, you know, paying the health gap more, you know, which would be a one-time expense, you know, rather than passing that cost on to employees. The consideration of the bonuses or of one-time bonuses is something that's been considered in other taxing entities. I mean, I just throw all these out there just because, again, it is just a recurring expense and, you know, just the acknowledgement that, again, we are looking right now as it stands with a $12 million gap between what we are planning to spend and what we're planning on bringing in, even at the rollback rate. And I think it's just going to make it more difficult for us in future years with the 3.5%. And yesterday I asked Wally that at some point, you know, if you can give us idea of kind of, you know, after all is said and done, if you can give us an idea of where we stand, you know, in terms of the costs we're going to be looking at already for next year that are already sort of, you know, pre-planned in the budget. But you know, just wanted to throw that out there before we talk about wages.
Okay.
And one thing I just want to be very clear, if we go back and revisit the 4.1 wage adjustment, then I suggest that we go back and check our own salaries and other elected official salaries before we go to that one.
Yeah, one of the, conceptually, what I felt during the process is that we had an opportunity, a very unlikely opportunity going forward to really protect our wages, protect the, you know, what we're gonna be paying our employees. That right now we do have, and I'm not saying it's a luxury or anything because you don't wanna think in those terms. But if you look at going forward, the chances of us to begin to fall behind are gonna start next year. We're gonna start, so if we're already not helping with that process, then we're gonna start falling behind, I think in the next 3 years. I really believe that we're not gonna be able to keep adding or helping the process. So my idea was, there's an opportunity for everybody, and then everybody understands what we're doing on a conceptual level, that not one group says, well, why you guys and not us, and why this and not, I think that would be extremely difficult from a morale standpoint. So I think when we made when we stepped forward into helping the judicial, when we stepped forward in helping the elected officials, I think we stepped in sort of understanding that we could leave others behind under those conditions. And so to me, I don't think we'll have another opportunity again in the next 3-4 years. And I think it's gonna become, you know, we have evidence of other organizations, other governments that are falling behind and they're having a difficult time recruiting. We're getting a lot of people from other agencies when we when we have a vacancy, a lot of them are coming from other agencies from around town. And I wouldn't want to be in that situation. I think we are very successful in our programs because of the caliber of people and because we get paid right. We get great candidates because of what we pay. So that's what I thought conceptually was an opportunity at this time. And then, yes, we're gonna have to tighten, but if we tighten now and tighten again, I don't know. Like I said, I don't think we'll have another opportunity to do where we're at and what we're trying to accomplish in its totality, not fragmented or one group does it and one group does. Anyway, I might be new from a governmental, but I'm looking at it from an HR perspective, and I know the dangers of stepping in to help certain groups and not others, or not be fair accordingly. So if we had gone that route, then we should have already not done some other things, and I think we've already committed to the other situation. So that's what I thought was the sort of the essence of what we were trying to accomplish. Get ourselves straightened out and then start taking the impact as we move forward.
Everybody's looking at you, Commissioner Stud.
Why?
Because I'm handsome. No, I mean, just what are your thoughts, just to get an idea from.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also like to see kind of where we would be next year with the cap. With some of these things that are already going to be baked in the budget. You know, when it comes to, I just think it's hard to give one class of employees something and another class of employees not at something, right? I mean, it's you know, Commissioner Perez, you've talked about like what's more important. You know, our budget is we're budgeting through our values, and so we're valuing one class of employees more than we're valuing another class of employees, and that's a really, I mean, that weighs heavily on me, and when I'm making these decisions, I think that it's you know, it's unfortunate that we have that issue, but I also think that it's, you know, we need to be cognizant of that, because that also, I think, sends a message to our employees that, you know what, these guys are more important than you, and I don't want to do that.
And all, like I said, I think by considering a lower percentage, I think every year the court has demonstrated that, you know, we value the employees they've received for the cost of COLA or wage adjustment every year. And then, if I remember correctly, there have been years where the COLA, I think, actually increased the cost of living than what was on the collective bargaining contract. Am I way off base on that? I mean, I know that the collective bargaining contract was, I think, limited to 1.5, and I think whereas there was a couple times where we exceeded that. And so I think, again, I could be wrong, I'm just recalling from previous discussions, but, you know, there have been instances where I think, you know, the COLA that was granted to, you know, our employees, you know, wasn't granted on the collective bargaining side because of contractual limitations. But all I'm looking for is, again, it's not an all or nothing. It's just I was really hoping that we could get to a more sensible number. To me, $12 million makes me a little nervous. It's $12 million again, plus $10 million with just, you know, additional payroll, recurring expense every year, plus the fact that like our fund balance is 10%, and you know, there's the economy's already starting to flash recession signs, and I hope that we just, you know, again, unfortunately, we've never had to govern in a recession, but, you know, we need to know the not the mistakes, but the lessons from the past, you know, from our predecessors that had to deal with layoffs, furloughs, and all those other things, and hopefully we would just be in a financially solvent place where if there was a downturn in the economy, or if we had a 5 or 10% drop in revenues, we'd be able to absorb that cushion. And that's it. And that's all I'm saying is just that I just hope we take careful consideration for that. It's not just about, like I said, giving it all up, but it's just, you know, I was a little disappointed to hear that there really isn't much, you know, or that if we don't do the 5.7, then we can't achieve, you know, a lot of these other, you know, objectives. It's
the 5.7
for
the
the
capital.
No, for wages.
Oh, wages.
You know, I mean, if something could be done with 3 or something, I would, you know, I'd be open to that. But it's just, you know, 5.7 is a lot. In my opinion, especially if we're starting off with the fund balance. And, you know, I'm trying to be responsible. Like you know, look, of the proposals that I've made, you know, I put forth, you know, I think the $1 million, you know, that wasn't in the proposed budget for economic development fund is critical. And I'm not, you know, I'm trying to, you know, do my due diligence. Is that if I'm going to propose something, I'm going to do my best to look at other, you know, other areas of the budget where we can perhaps scale back. You know, typically I advocate for the $4 million on stormwater. You know, I scaled that back this year, but it's just that's all. I just hope that we're just cognizant of that and the implications that it's going to have on us in the future, because, you know, we're going to be entering, new territory that's very unfamiliar to all of us.
I think that if we want to look at reducing the budget, I don't know if we do it on the wage side. I think there are other things that are also considered discretionary funding that we warned, for example, that we talked about when we went to testify against SB2, that we talked about. I mean, economic development. I mean, we all want to have, economic development tools, but that's really, I mean, ancillary to what our, what our core duties are as a county. Right? And, those are some of the things that we need to, I think if we're gonna be looking at cutting something, that's where we start, not people's wages.
And then one of the things is that, I think I've asked this every year, is that when it comes to the market adjustments, and, I've asked about the cost of the market adjustments, but, where is it that our employees, fall? And that's something that I guess, before we, I think, give, these wage adjustments, I mean, we do it with collective bargaining. We do a thorough analysis of where we stand relative to other communities, relative to the region, but, I mean, where are our employees relative to other counties? Are we still,
I think we.
And we did a study and we brought in public sector personnel consultants within the past 2 years, and they benchmarked us. And they said we're running right at 90 to 100% of market.
Statewide.
And local, and they did compare to also some counties.
And there were some positions that were below that 90% threshold, and those were the ones that we added to the reclassification plan that immediate next year to get them up to the 90% threshold. Yes, sir.
But I just want, and that's it, like, if it can be, if someone shows me something that says, attorneys here are paid less than what they are in other counties, just like what we're trying to do with elected officials and measuring that, then I would say, okay, well, let's do whatever necessary to do that, but I've yet to see any data to show that attorneys here, with comparable duties are making less than, the thing about county government is that all counties, for the most part, function the same, right? I mean, they have the same offices and the same duties and, the same responsibilities and the same levels in the same positions.
But you thought we had.
So we're not saying that we're falling significantly behind. Okay, let me back up. So it was I believe it was in 2013, it was during fiscal year 2012, I believe, when we originally brought the 7-year reclassification plan. At that point, I would say the county was really behind. And when I look back at what the county had historically done, the county had gone out and hired a consultant to come in and in one swoop look at all wages. And back at that time, Ed and Wally told me the impact of them coming in and doing that all at once was over $2 million at one time. So when we talk about like layering it on year after year, when the county had done it before, the county brought in a $2 million cost all in 1 year to wages, and to that wasn't for COLAs or steps. That was just to bring
Market.
people to.
That's why we set aside $300,000 every year.
So yes,
for market
sir.
adjustments.
So and we were just recovering from recession, and I knew we couldn't afford $2 million all at once and then going every year forward. So we brought that 7-year plan and budgeted the $300,000 per year. Some years we spent less, some years we spent more. We came and asked for additional funding because we were doing a larger group, like the attorneys. So we spent basically the $2.1 million that we would have spent in year 1 over the 7 years, but it would have been 7 times 2.1 because, like you say, it compounds. So we would have, if we would have, and it probably would have been higher than 2 million over that at that time. But that's what worked over the last 7 years to get us closer to competitive market. I think we have good wages, market wages. And what we're proposing isn't to get us caught up to market, it's to keep us at market. So, you know, if you hold wages stagnant, which I know you're not proposing to do that, we'll be back to where we were in 2013 eventually, needing to catch up over several years. And, you know,
What was the point of doing that if we're gonna just go back to where we were?
and the other thing is, it's much more difficult to catch back up, and it's not just the wage issue, catching the wages up. You then start having more turnover, more, you know, you're spending more time
morale.
recruiting, you're spending more time and efforts, you know, getting people back up to the level of knowledge of the individuals you lost. So that's just from the wage, why we propose the wages we're proposing. Also, I know, you know, we talked about the city. I know that the city is working on a wage study. It's my understanding that over the next year they're working on bringing a wage study. If they do a across the board wage study, it's gonna be a significant cost. And it's gonna be a catch-up cost. Whereas the way we've done it and the way we're doing it in these like tranches helps us keep from getting back there. You know, and just in speaking with our contacts at the city HR, they are, I know, struggling to keep some of their positions filled. And they're having a difficult time filling, like, you know, some of their like bus drivers, trash collecting, you know, several positions they're having a difficult time keeping filled. Also, I have a recruitment I'm in the midst of right now. I have 40 top candidates being considered further. 20% of them are from the city.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Judge,
Yes.
Commissioners, in the interest of time, and I think Commissioner Perez brings up some excellent points, that in the coming years, we're gonna have some challenges. And unless we have the appetite to come back and look at our own salaries, I'm gonna make a motion to accept the 4.1 wage adjustment.
Second.
Commissioner Bettis,
No.
Commissioner Leon,
Aye.
Commissioner Stout,
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson is absent, Judge Samanier.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Those were good points.
I mean, we just may have to go to the voters. You know, I mean, if we, you know,
Yes, sir.
No, in the way I look at it,
but like I said, I mean, I think there are other things that we could look at
yeah.
that can be reduced, like, you know, all of that other extra spending that doesn't have to do with our employees' wages, like the economic development, like the, you know, pull up the list and, I mean, there's.
Right.
You know, there's just,
No, I know I don't need to explain my situation, but I'm actually supporting something the court had decided to do. So I come in here at this point and I'm looking at all the commitments you made and
I mean,
everything that you promised and now, you know, why would we not continue if was what the court wanted to do from way back? Be at market, hit the 80%, you know, all these things that were things that you wanted to do, and I think that's where we're in the middle. The other one is the way, like I said, from organizational outside, we would commit to the employees, but then the employees would commit to us. Efficiencies, that they work hard on certain areas, that we don't spend money where we don't no need to spend, where they're more productive, where they're, and that's the way you do it, because then if we have a commitment to help them, then we have to figure ways of engaging our employees to help us back. And I can tell you that just 1% of efficiency from every employee is worth a lot of money. I mean, just the savings, the not discarding things, not, just all these, the consciousness, but it's not gonna come, they need guidance from every department head to be able to say, okay, there's a commitment for us to do something with wages, so, and then us as well. I mean, what are we gonna look, every Monday, we should be looking at efficiencies and cost of commitments and, whether or not people ask for more money when maybe they shouldn't, and so I think if we do what we've done, we have an incredible, commitment ourselves as commissioners and myself, that we look at all the efficiencies that we can, and when we're there on Monday, that we look at the expenditures closer. I mean, it just sort of forces us to be more engaged. To make a commitment like that, that's a big commitment to 4%. But then it's our commitment on Monday to be very prepared to make sure that we're looking closely at what departments that they're gonna spend and what they're spending. So the only thing I can say, let's engage in making sure that it's not a burden because we helped employees, and then when it becomes a burden going forward, we can minimize it.
I mean, we talked about, like I said, when we went to testify against SB2, we talked about cuts that would have to be made, and we have to be realistic about making those cuts, right? I mean, 70% of our budget is spent on state mandated programs and support services for those mandated programs.
Betsy?
Yes, we were gonna pull up the chart. Go ahead, Wally.
This is the chart we started our hearings with. It was in your original presentation that was emailed to you about 3 years ago. This was prior to new budget being loaded, just normal historical patterns. You can see where the reserves were going. Expenses on the top line crisscrossing in FY19, and then revenues on the bottom kind of going forward. At the request of the court, built the model, and one you just mentioned, Commissioner Leon, was adding the 2020 rollback tax rate. What I would anticipate to be based off of the growth in the budget, the original $32 million growth in the budget, 32.9, where I thought our projected expenses would end up next year. Net expenses up at 312, revenues down at 303. Again, this is assuming the 2019 rollback tax rate that adds $20.5 million to the revenue stream in Mr. Dion's revenue estimates as of June. I just got July's revenue estimates last night, so we're going over those now, and we'll include those in the budget. So we can see where over time we'll still anticipate to have a consumption of the reserves of 70, 60, 40. This only has normal revenue growth going into the future, but does account for the layer of rollback taxes you would be adding in this fiscal year. The last model I built was...
Well,
yes,
before
sir.
you go to the next model, what year is it that our bonds drop off? 21?
So we have a drop off in bonds in FY23. So this is just the general fund view, but we do have the capacity to issue additional debt without having too much impact on the tax rate, having zero impact. However, and Ms. Keller can back me on this, we absolutely have needs beyond that capacity that we're going to gain in 2023. We're working on a presentation for the court on what we believe needs to be considered for future bond issuance. We'll discuss that in the first quarter of the fiscal year. If the appetite of the court is for us to move forward on that during the spring of next year, work with our collective finance team to start moving that model forward. But
This graph doesn't take
no,
that
sir,
into
no, this is
account.
general fund only. But let me tell you how this graph can be affected. So Commissioner Stout, the ideas that you brought up, Commissioner Bettis, what we talked about yesterday with capital projects. As we look at being very strategic with our future bond issue and potentially looking at moving things that are bondable out of the general fund and into that bond issue, getting the authority to issue, have a bond order that says, and I don't want to just raw numbers out there. This is nothing we've contemplated. We don't have a solid number on this, but let's just say we've got $75 million worth of projects we need to do for our own infrastructure. And then we say, we also want to do our stormwater and do some serious stormwater planning. To the extent that we know we've got $150 million in stormwater projects and we have capital needs, as we look at getting the authority to do these bond issuances at the large dollar amount, but not pulling the trigger on those bond issuances until the fiscal year that we're ready for it, we can be very strategic on how to help you manage that budget moving
We
forward.
wouldn't pull the money down immediately, we pull the money down as needed, so that we're not paying the.
Correct. You're not paying the interest on money we
Putting
draw
the bank.
down. It's smart for arbitrage management as well and not having excess
Well,
interest earnings.
Along those lines, how much of that particular effort is in the current budget?
Well, then that's stealing our thunder. Thanks for
Sorry.
But that's and I'll tell you, he's Mr. Dion. I respect him. I've worked under his leadership for 27 years, and the man has a lot of institutional knowledge and has really been a safeguard to the county's bottom line and its assets. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank him for that learning. But as we look at the $10 million we have budgeted on the general fund for our stormwater projects, as we look at the $9.6 million that we're proposing to have for the capital improvement fund, we have the ability to pull almost $20 million out of the general fund from FY 2021 forward, but strategically align that with our bond authority to go out and do the other large infrastructure needs we have. We've got JP62 sitting in a double wide trailer that is way under capacity. As we look at the development of other
I need
annexes,
more space.
it will be a challenge. You see where we're going to have that consumption in the future. I even built the next model, and I'll use it to lead into that, saying if we did a 2019 rollback and under a cap situation with 3.5, Commissioner Bettis, the number you had asked me yesterday is normal new tax growth with new construction and revaluation that where we fall way behind the rest of the state, about $4.4 million a year. The rollback tax rate, assuming that all things stay the same and that all the numbers that come in with exemptions and sales tax, it's about $6.6 million. So just normal growth in taxes alone with the new rollback rates, about $11 million. Our charges for services, our revenues coming in from departments, sales tax growth, I hope it still remains strong. The relationship we have with this border community has helped, and the Fort Bliss military base has helped us be somewhat resilient to some of the significant impacts other communities have had during recessions. So we do get a little insulation on that. It does trouble me that we're having our bridge issues and the migrant issue and the ability to move people effectively back and forth across the border. However, that normal growth in revenue is about $1.5 million to $2 million. So I would expect somewhere between $12 and $13 million in the 2021 year going to the 3.5 rollback. So then what I did is just layered this year's expected growth, knowing that we spend about 95% of our budget on the personnel side, about 93% on the operating side, and sort of pattern that forward. So you can see where this year it's estimated about $33 million is that shortfall with no significant changes going out to 2024. By doing another rollback in FY 2021, we trim about $20 million off of that. But the more important thing is if we do consider that bond issuance, in the fall, to look at not only our infrastructure needs, but look at our stormwater needs, and even getting the authority if we're going to really meet our stormwater needs for this community into the next decade.
And what amount?
We've all seen numbers in that $150 to $200 million range, but if we look at strategically saying, you know what, in 2021, let's do these $60 million worth of projects, but have the authority that in 2022, let's do that next $40 million tranche and really look at that long-term impact of this community, but also picking up that capacity on the budget of being able to move upwards of $18 to $20 million off the operating side and over the interest and sinking side. We are far below. We are the lowest on the top 10 counties. We have the lowest amount of debt on the county's books. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of capacity as far as our own policy. If you look at statute, we have $2 billion in capacity. And I'm not encouraging you to issue $2 billion worth of debt, but statutorily, that's how high you could go. By our own policy, we say our maximum debt will be $888 million, and we're at $166 million. And we know our long-term needs are rather significant, but we can affect that future operating by looking strategically at moving things off the operating side.
We just need to be cognizant about the fact that if we're gonna be looking at doing that through certificates as opposed to going to the voters,
Right.
then, you know, the next budget, the next legislative session, they're gonna be coming for our COs, just like we did this last time.
Well, I think we can discuss with some of the other larger counties how they handle their bond issuances. I know Harris County does some strategic planning and actually issue commercial paper. That way they get the money when they need it, and then later they basically issue debt, like a refunding, bring it all
Replace the
together.
commercial paper.
So there are some mechanisms in place that we can do things where you can get the money when you need it. That's different, and you can still put it into your INS.
And certainly, I would say that's a challenge at hand to help us meet just our day-to-day operating needs in the future is what can we do to be, to remain those strong stewards of our fiscal reserves, but also look at how can we sustain those operations into the future. And as you say, Commissioner Perez, which was the number one goal you had on your financial portion of the policies. As I look out there, that number one on there, is flashing at me, and that is to pull that alignment of revenues and expenses into the future. Will that mean we've got to just continue to really take that hold the line approach? I think absolutely for the next couple of years.
Not just hold the line, but I think we're gonna have to, I don't know how we do it, to say, we tell each department, you're gonna have to cut your budget by 5%. Tell us how you wanna do it. I don't know.
That's how we did it when we needed to, during the recession. Remember, we started off, we did a mid-year reduction as well. So, and
We had freezes of
departments,
vacancies.
But 5% is people. I'll tell you right now, 5% is people. You can't cut people up into your operating. You would not be able to operate with 5% cuts on operating.
and the way departments, we gave departments the ability to also look at, did they have positions that were vacant that they could freeze and hold? Was there, different ways of doing it. And while it was not easy, it was definitely not, it wasn't a struggle as far as getting people to be helpful. Everyone came to the table, everyone worked as hard as they could to make those reductions.
And then just to throw the last number out there, so Commissioner, you had asked, so what do we know we have as the revenue stream with the 3.5 cap is in that $12 million range. The expense side, collective bargaining. Now this was our bump up year. This was the 4% as opposed to the 1.5% going forward. So that 4.6 next year comes down to 2.6. But that 2.6 is a known number that goes into the future, and it will grow a little bit because it's a 1.5% COLA. The following year it's at 1.5 from a new base, so that 2.6 will grow to 2.75. It'll grow to 2.9.
You mean that's 2.6 million is what?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So this year's 4.6, but next year's 2.6. So that number backs off a little bit. The other components. So we do have contracts across the county that we know predictably do go up. They've got CPI inflators in them, but my other movement on the other side is in the $1.5 million to $2 million range of those just contractual increases, CPI inflators with contracts we have for food preparation and things of that. But so my predictables are pretty close to $4 to $4.5 million in normal expected growth with collective bargaining and other contracts.
That's it, and I know you do this, but I think we need to act already, not sort of wait. But I think if there was any opportunity, we're already doing that with the council of judges, where they come in and they're gonna report once a month, and I think that's also there an opportunity to discuss, where they're at in their budgets and so forth. But I think if we took an assertive approach with and helping them with department heads and where they would come in and they could meet with us and have a discussion. I think they need, very important to me, is that they need to know what the impact of the 4% is, and also to give them speaking points as to the employees, as if they are in a good place. And I don't know, you probably do that, but I think we should really communicate to every employee, you know, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is what, and then have us participate to encourage the process. But we need to act like now, as if this, we know we're gonna do it. I mean, we know we're headed in that direction. And so I think we should have a strategy of employee communication, of talking to them about savings, about talking to them about, you already saying if you don't need a vacant position, maybe you're not gonna get it, maybe, but you understand, just sort of going out of this budget with a very assertive approach as to having the employees engage with us
Yes, sir.
on this process now, but not when we get hit with the issues.
Yes, sir.
So whatever we could do, I mean, I know I'll be available, I know the commissioners themselves, but I think we need to become more interactive in that process.
Yes, sir.
And well, where would you, this chart here is just for the 20, you're looking at 2020 rollback. Is there one that has, if we were to go to the rollback every year and
No,
with the historical expenditures and,
Yeah,
because this is just, the only thing that concerns me
Yeah.
is we've, at one point I know that we were growing at about 14% a year. Then I know it slowed a little bit, but our revenues weren't certainly growing 14% a year. And at some point, we're just gonna run out of options, and that's what, that's what SB2 was designed to do. I mean, it was designed to, it was, to limit government to the point where, we're to deplete our revenues where it was designed to shrink government. Even if we go to the rollback rate every year and we tax our residents to the max every year, even if we switch over everything from the general fund to the capital side, we're gonna run out of options at some point. And we're gonna have a gap between our revenues and expenditures, and then what do we do? I mean, it's just that's the position that the legislature has put us in, and I'm just and I hear what folks are saying about just being diligent, but we just got to recognize that personnel makes up 80% of our budget, and let's hope that we don't get a downturn. And I don't know what the downturn was when we had the previous recession. What was the decrease in revenues that you all experienced? Was it like a 10% decrease?
No,
But,
not that dramatic.
okay, but that's just the concern, is that we can do all of these things temporarily, where we can move things to capital, we can go to the rollback rate this year, we can go to the rollback rate in the following years, but it's just that the percentage growth of our expenses does not match the percentage growth of our revenues, and that's not a good course to be on, especially now. But that's all. With that,
Well, one of the ways to look at personnel is also that you have the processes in place that if you lose someone, you don't go, people used to have, I'll put a process in and let go of people. What we're finding now is that we become process oriented. When somebody leaves, we don't have to replace them because the process is effective enough to keep things going with less people. And I don't think we've looked at that, our processes and the as is versus how we need to be through process orientation. And I've seen some incredible things in reducing payroll costs, not by cutting people, but not needing, when people leave, that there's a process in place that takes over for. So I think there's a lot we could do internally to go to the personnel side of the cost without lowering, I think we've done the right thing, but now we need to make sure that, and I know you do a great job about this, Betsy, but go in and find out, are there processes there? Are there duplications? Are there handoffs that shouldn't be there? Is there in the clerks and the district clerks? And I don't know if we've gone really into, and the technology, of course.
An example of that, Judge, is when I think back to the 52 positions that we riffed when we went through our last economic downturn, we did not bring all 52 positions back. You find ways to, that sometimes, a downturn's never a good thing, but there are good things that sometimes come out of
Oh,
them.
absolutely.
I remember when we went through the last one, we started discovering things, or it forced us to look at processes more. It forced us to look at certain things, and there were some things that we realized, and expenses, positions that we said we can do without these. And it was a forced process. And it's not that I don't think departments don't think about it now or don't want to do it now, but it's different when you have no choice but to do it. Because maybe you've always thought about evaluating, how we run the golf course, but you're so busy running it, you don't stop and look at it. That's just an example. I mean, so when you're forced, there are some good things that come out of it.
No, I've been shocked at going through process enterprise and being process focused, and then you get IT engaged. You get process, the experts of running an organization, but with some outside views of saying, okay, let me look at how you handle the district clerk's office and what are your processes, and then I've been shocked at the number of not having to rehire people, or the process makes it more effective, that makes things cheaper to
Right.
run. So
Right. And sometimes we come in and we say, look, we're doing these 5 things that the court wants us to do. But we're gonna have to cut something. Do you want us to cut one program altogether? We think this is the program with the least participants, least outcomes. If we just cut the 1, we can keep the 4, or, do we look at cutting a little from all 5? It really is sometimes a healthy exercise, as hard as it can be, so.
I agree. I think there's, like I said, we made a commitment, now we have to make the commitment to uphold and our decisions. If we just increase 4% and we back away, then that's not where I'm coming from.
And Judge, we have a lot riding on the efficiency study that we have with the jail facility. I mean, the company HOK has a track record of generating millions of dollars of efficiencies, but I can't emphasize enough what we have riding on, and it's going to be a significant capital expense. But if we can shave off $20 million from our operating expense, I mean, then it's well worth it. But that's
a great example.
I hope for things like that come through, and that was the purpose of this, is anticipating that we're going to be in this situation.
That's a great
But we have a lot riding on that.
Okay, the next item is the judicial salaries. These are the options that you all discussed last week, I believe it was. You indicated that you were leaning towards option 2. That is included in the number we have in the budget.
Do we need a motion for that?
I think we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept option 2.
Second.
As it pertains to the judicial salary.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Flores?
Aye.
Commissioner Lau?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Aye.
Judge Salomon?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yes, sir.
The next item that we have is the capital fund.
Betsy, I don't know if Mr. Gandon, I don't know if he.
Jaime, do you want to address anything else? They've addressed the attorney salaries.
Yes, no, that's fine. I must confess, I'm curious to hear what's going on, but that's okay, I can follow it.
Oh,
Some
okay.
parallels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gandon.
I'll go with him. Thank you all for supporting. I'm going to leave as his lawyer. Thank you all very much for supporting the employees. And if I could just say thank you. I know the elected official salaries are really hard, and we come and we ask you for increases, and that you all are the ones that have to defend it in public. I think that honestly, you all are being very courageous in doing what you think is right. And on behalf of the lawyers and the people in the county attorney's office, thank you for supporting and funding the plan. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Joy.
The CIP that we have in that's proposed at 5.4, it's a reduction from this list here. This is what we've evaluated as our ongoing CIP replacement needs. These are things that annually we have a need to replace and to update. So obviously, countywide, the computers, printers, scanners, PC, laptops, surfaces, vehicles and light, heavy equipment, radios, stenography machines, in motion, ADA, space allocation, HVAC units, miscellaneous sheriff security protective gear. We get requests every year for the e-ticket system, which is a really important part of our slow gained efficiencies, body cameras, copier high volume specialty printers, the Ascarity light decorations. That will be ongoing for a little while, but eventually we believe we'll get to the point that we can reduce that. Specialty paving projects come up every year. We're not allowed. Previously, we were not allowed to use road and bridge funds to do our own specialty type paving projects. So that this would be for those types of projects. Park improvements, sidewalks, doors, new position fund for when we add new staff, contingency cost variance. That's overall, as we do these, we always have some cost variances and we try to have a contingency, and the facility IT contingency. This is when we want to add technology, modify something. So the total is 8.3. And what we are proposing, based on, again, we're trying to scale back, thinking of the expense growth. We scaled it back to 5.4.
And the commissioners, you had asked yesterday at the close of the day, is we were to consider moving that to a bond issuance with that annual impact be, not only this 5.4, but the 4.2 penny that we have now. So I have a couple charts I'm gonna pull up really quickly, and I'll gladly email them to you when I'm done.
If you were going to do that, I'd recommend you do the whole 8.4. The whole CIP 8.4, not just the scaled down version.
Are you gonna show us the scale down?
Well, so the run that our bond counsel did for us last evening was on $9.6 million, which was a penny into 5.4. I mean, I could tell you just top of my head how that number would go up. The impact to the tax rate is sitting right here on a $9.6 million issue. So it's just under a third of a cent starting off, and it's an 8-year issue with an average useful life of 8 years on these types of assets. So if we were gonna do the whole thing, we would add about $3 million more on that. And $3 million more would basically just add a third to whatever this model is. So that'd probably go up another 1/10 of a cent on the interest and sinking. However, I'll remind you that on that
That's
initiative.
for 1 year.
That's 1 year. So that's something that you would have to consider doing each and every year. And my concern is legislatively in the future, we may have our hands tied on that. Keeping the 5.4 in this year, it's part of your M&O. So if we look at a strategic longer term bond issuance and rolling this in, we could pick that capacity up in 2021. This does have an impact overall over the life of the debt of about $1.5 million in interest. That's actually 1.417. That's that number right here. So if I get out of this, make that bigger. So interest is at 1.417. That's on the market's latest rates and rate reductions, and it's about $180,000 in issuance costs. So it's still in that $1.65 million range on interest cost over the term, interest and issuance costs over the term of that debt.
So basically it cost us about.
So we could take that $12 million or so off of this year's budget, the M&O side, and we could bond it.
But on an ongoing basis, that's something you have to do bonding each year, whereby if you set it in your M and O
So
side,
every year you'd be giving another, like, what did
another
you say
third of a
about,
cent, another third of a
a
cent.
little bit more at that rate?
Probably 4/10 of a cent.
I mean, that's something that I think we have to entertain. That's one of the, also one of the things that we talked about when we went to argue with folks about SB 2 is that, in the long run, it's gonna cost taxpayers more to have to do that, but
Right, here's a great example, it's gonna cost them about, what is that, about 15 to 18% of the cost?
Overall?
The 1.4 plus the issuance cost
Right.
of the 8 million? It's about,
Just under 20,
right,
just a hair under 20.
18%.
Right. But I think capacity-wise and strategically, that's probably something you want to more seriously consider as we look at the all-encompassing bond issuance in 2021. Because if 6 months from now, as we're doing our quarterlies, as we're giving you the quarterly update in January for December and quarterly update for March of next year in April, seeing where we're at, how that spending is going, where we're at economically, are we at that recessionary state, and what's the impact having on this community at that time. From a timing perspective, I think the more serious consideration for that movement is probably FY 2021.
Oh, I appreciate you showing this. I mean, it was good for us to just evaluate, especially the interest cost and the cost of an issuance. I think, it's no secret, unfortunately, because of what we're facing next year. A lot of government entities are doing this, are trying to maximize our capacity for this year. It may not be the best decision to take this off this year, but perhaps seriously consider it.
Yeah, it is absolutely a 2021 serious conversation. I think for 2020, this model is a working model. It gives us that capacity for the future, but also if we're able to maintain it into 2021 and thereafter, the savings to the community from future taxations is significant. It is significant, and I think it's an exercise we have got to look at super closely as we enter the first quarter of fiscal year 20 and as we begin our FY 2021 planning. And I can tell you that planning starts Monday because strategically we have our budget follow-up meeting next week, myself, Melissa, and Betsy, to say, all right, let's debrief. Let's start planning 2021. And that starts on Monday for us. We have a consensus to keep it in as recommended for 2020.
That's fine.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Everyone, great, thank you. So I will incorporate Mr. Dion's latest revenue estimates into the package we'll begin preparing after we close today's hearings. My team will put in all the changes that you see on the register to date, incorporate the latest revenue and fund balance estimates. The package that you'll get that we will file with the clerk's office and the auditor's office via statute, of course, we'll get as well, will look different than this. This is the GFOA format. We have a lot of balance sheet, trial balance, and contracts. The statute's pretty exhaustive on everything we have to include in that package, so it'll look very financially driven, but the statute, that's the package we'll be working on preparing as soon as we close today's hearings. Anticipate filing that package with the respective bodies by the end of next week, sending it to the court. We'll have our tax hearing on the 21st and the 29th. And items will be on the agenda for us to adopt both the tax rate and the budget on September 9th.
9th?
Yes, sir. And I will leave 4 members here for that meeting as well. So, calendars September 9th. We have to have a quorum of 3 for our public hearings for tax rates on the 21st and 29th. But for the day we adopt the tax rate, I do need to have a quorum, makes up 4 statutorily. I only need a vote for 3, but 4 is required for that purpose.
One of the items, I don't know if we had made a definitive decision, but on the $100,000 reserved for the new office, or the creation of a new office for immigrants. Again, I'm reluctant to create a recurring expense, to our budget, and is that in there?
So right now, the funding is set aside, it's not been determined what it's for.
For which one?
For migrant immigrant services, we still have, so this year we had 100,000. Right now in FY19, we had 100,000. We brought several options to the court, and the court, including creating an office. The court did not commit to creating an office this year. Then the court allowed us to use the fund to do both responding to the immediate situation we were facing, and we used it a couple times to help in urgent situations where we needed meals. And then we brought back an item and we used it, the court committed it to use for transport. So that's what we used the 100,000 for this year. We left the 100,000, but we got a price on what transportation would be for a year. So we didn't know whether you all wanted to go with just the 158, which would be increasing the 100,000 to 558,000, or whether you wanted to do more than the transport. So we brought you both options so that you could either tell us, take the 100,000 out, or if you want to possibly have it to use for something else. And right now it's in, but it's not dedicated to a specific cause yet.
I mean, I think I'd rather just have it in a contingency fund or something for the event. But I mean, originally we did allocate the $100,000 that went to that, but since we've now identified transportation, $158,000, I think that's.
We do have it in G-admin right now, in a generic, it's not, it's in
I
G-admin.
believe it's it's confirming right now.
It is, I know it's G-admin.
I disagree. I think we need to keep it there. I mean, I've advocated heavily to try to create, an office or immigrant services position that would tend to the needs of the folks in our community who are immigrants, and we can go over the benefits and what that type of office would do again if you would like, but I think it's something that's very necessary, especially taking into account that 25% of the population here is foreign born. We've been dealing with this migrant and refugee issue for quite a while now, a number of months, and I think that folks within the jail need to be advised of their rights. I think that people, the families and folks that maybe coming through here need access to services and need access to a one-stop shop, a place where they can go and find out about those services, whether it be educational, legal, healthcare, any and all of those services. I think all of those things would be very beneficial to a lot of folks within this community, and that's why I continue to to advocate for creating something like this.
Let me just understand this. Commissioner Pettis, you're advocating keep the money in there, but not make it a reoccurring expense?
In the event that there is something like, as we continue to see that if there was another spike where we're called on that goes over and above the 158,000 for transportation, let's say if more meals are needed or something on an emergency basis, I would have that maybe just in a general contingency fund, not necessarily specific for immigrants, but just there.
Right, and we like using it for one-time services versus an ongoing operation.
And that's where we have it right now, in the general contingencies.
So, my idea for that $100,000 there is to create an Office for New Americans. That's the only reason why I would vote for it to continue to be that.
And the only difference I'm understanding is,
Which is why I voted for it last time too, because I thought that's what we were gonna do last time.
a reoccurring expense as opposed to year to year.
It's just that, with limitations that we're facing, I think we already shortchange our residents in areas like libraries. Personally, like I said, that for spending $300,000 on libraries for a county of 850,000 people and 200,000 that live outside the city limits of El Paso, it's a very small amount. And setting up a new office for migrant affairs I just don't think it's appropriate time. It's something we're just gonna have to reassess and as revenue caps come in.
Wally, when does the fountains fall off insofar as the 381?
We actually think in the next 24 to 36 months, they're gonna hit that dollar amount capped out.
And just off the ballpark, how much of a?
How much tax
Hang on, okay.
revenue?
And I didn't mean to detour.
It's on the.
Yeah, I know, some point. So you see the sales tax there, Fountains of Fair, and the property taxes right now, $900,000 is next year's. By the time this thing drops off, about $1 million a year that'll be coming in.
Addition.
Yes, sir. That'll stay in the general fund that we will not pay out in the vacancy.
In 21 or 20?
No, probably closer to 2022. It all depends just literally how valuation appraisals go up, they pay those taxes, and how robust sales are. So as they add, they still have a number of vacancies in that facility, so as they add new shops to vacant footprint, the sales tax will be paid out a little more rapidly. But in the next 24 to 36, that'll be at least $1 million a year conservatively coming to the general fund.
Wow. So that hits more or less at the same time that the bonds drop off.
Yes, sir.
22, 23.
Yes. And as we look at developing the 2021 and therefore thereafter budgets, we'll work closely with our economic development team just to look for those
Something
little
too,
blips that pop on.
We should be able to use the new brain system to help us factor some of those things in for future forecasting. For future outlooks, we have a system that we should be able to tie that into.
Thank you.
Anyway, that would be my suggestion of just moving it to contingency. And taking it off isn't $100,000 isn't going to make much of a difference to the tax rates.
Okay, so I'm hearing two views. I haven't heard from Commissioner Arnold or the judge. On the $100,000, are you wanting us to bring back a proposal to create an office, or are you wanting us to hold it as a contingency in case any costs come up during the year?
My thought is whether we keep it year to year or we make it a permanent, we can always go back next year if things go south and revisit that. So I'm in favor of keeping it as permanent, but keeping in mind that next year is another year as far as the budget.
Keeping it as permanent as a
Reoccurring.
contingency, but not to create an office with staffing to be paid out of,
Well,
staff.
Whether we create one or not, it's not gonna make a difference in the total amount.
It would not increase the amount. It would be, the concept would be we'd have an employee,
So that would be a new
which is kind
sustained,
of a longer commitment,
right, that'd be a new sustained.
unless you
cost.
all chose to cut the position.
And those functions are being performed by you.
Well, they're really not being performed. We're not doing migrant outreach. What we have in there is we have it as a reserve, so you could use it, if you all wanted to direct us to go have a publication printed and available and distributed through the ports or somewhere, I don't know, libraries, I don't know what means we distribute it through. We would use that $100,000 right now. But if we create a position to do these services, that would be the major cost would be the personnel cost.
Where I would see the value was the coordination, because I'm thinking, Ruben calls us, Rodriguez or Ruben Garcia, and then we sort of scramble, and it's your deal and my deal, and they'll call somebody else's office, and so I see a big role at the initial stages of someone that coordinates with the consulate, for example, and what they're trying to do. And they come and ask us, but there's not really a point of contact. So I always felt like anything had to do with refugees, it just sort of was diffused through all of us. So the way I see the position at first would be someone that we can depend on to sort of guide us to that office or guide us to, maybe there's other things, but I do see that position as someone that can really address some of the things. We meet, three of us, to talk to the OEM, and then somebody else meets them, and that's where I felt like we were a little discoordinated because we didn't have a direct person for anybody to go to. And so from my perspective of what I've seen is that the coordination part of it would be essential. Even coordinating them to, services somewhere else and, what other people are doing. And then once we understand that, then we would determine the office itself. But I think the position could be valuable. Just what I've gone through and chasing things down or asking Nicole to talk to Ruben Garcia or Chief Garcia so anyway, that's where I see the value at this time, the position, and then working with Commissioner Stout and determining what's the next steps.
So is that, Commissioner Stout, or Commissioner Leon, is that what you're thinking? Okay, so what I'm hearing is to take that $100,000 and use it to create the position.
I don't know if that's what you're thinking.
Is this establishing a whole new, office of immigrant affairs? 'Cause
It would be
I'm-
a position.
Without the office yet, until we.
We'd have to have a proposal of where it would fall under, probably community services, what I would imagine, I don't know.
I'm not
Or-
definitive on that yet. We'd wanna look at that. But, so we would, not all of it would be, I think, salaries. I think there's a little bit of room for operations in that, in our proposal. So what we would do is it's in the budget, we will, work on how that would break down. And we'll bring it back as a, budget adjustment.
I'll just break it out as a line item in and of itself for the 100,000 for the migrant services, just as a holder, and we will, and then once determined, we would move that accordingly to the department for operating and personnel.
Do we need a vote, Chris?
I think that needs direction.
Consensus. What we will ultimately need a vote on is just to give us the authority to effectuate all of the consensus that you've provided through the last 2 weeks, so that we could go about preparing the actual budget documents that we could file next week.
So that would basically be an authorization of what you see on the screen
Yes, ma'am.
and the other general direction you all have given us over the last couple of weeks.
Correct. I would only, the only thing that I would modify that for is, as I've got revenue estimates in it for Mr. Dion, it's just rebalancing those revenue estimates for each fund.
Commissioner
I had
Pettis.
something I mentioned this morning, a question about is if we could look at the amount of subsidy to the golf course has been something that we're gonna, we've talked about in previous years, but we sort of have just accepted, but if we could bring that up, or
So
it's because in my opinion it's significant, but from my understanding, we're subsidizing the golf course to a point
Yes.
of $1.2 million a year.
That's correct. So currently, the golf course budget for the operation side and the maintenance of the golf course is just over $2 million. It is, let's go back and note, it's $2,069,000. And the revenue estimates for next year, $806,000 is the revenue estimate. So we're just over $1.2 million in this.
okay, and before you rely on those numbers, do we have the actual revenue for the golf course this year?
I can get it real fast.
Because that's the auditor's projection.
Sure.
And I'm hesitant to rely on that projection. I do agree it receives a major subsidy. But I just wanna, and what I would ask, that's totally under our control, you all can change it at any time. I would ask that we do a more thorough, we did a really thorough overview of it, but I'd like to update that overview to like where it's at today and bring that back. Cause I do think, and we can bring back some options on how to reduce it.
Because I think 1.2 million, I mean, that's a pretty significant subsidy. I don't know how, I mean, the number of members who golf, and I understand that, the golf course has been around a long time, but we really have to take a hard look of, there's a couple hundred members that golf. And just the idea that taxpayer funds to the tune of 1.2 million possibly are being spent to subsidize those couple hundred memberships when I feel like we don't provide adequate services in other areas, like I said, libraries being one, we really have to take a hard look at that.
And absolutely, we might be able to, I'm not committing to any of this, I'm just using ideas. But we could bring back a proposal, possibly if we eliminated like the Delta 9. We might be able to reduce some of our operating cost, and still have a golf course, but be able to reduce our operating costs without impacting our revenue significantly. So, that would make up some of the gap.
Yeah.
And the gap, when I say make up the gap, that's money basically returning to the general fund.
And I'm optimistic. I've been hearing so many people thinking of having their tournaments there that didn't. Everybody, I think we lost about 30 or 40% to Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss was, I was just shocked at the number of times that I would hear, we used to be at Escalante, we're now at Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss was really catering, like making it more efficient, helping them with the tournaments, and I think Veronica is really gonna do good there. So I think, I don't know how much that would be an impact, but I'm really optimistic of what I'm hearing for next year.
That's why I want the numbers, the actual numbers, because I know they've increased.
Yeah, they have to.
The revenue has increased, it's still not making up the gap,
So golf carts, I'm sorry.
but we could reduce
Well, that
expenses.
and how significant the cost is, versus any other golf
That's
course.
projections.
I know it's touchy to raise it, but my goodness. We're probably 30-40% cheaper of any golf course and it's getting better. And we're still paying $28, I think, for
And
card and
how far?
the whole.
Yeah, the other thing I worry about is, the number of public golf courses in El Paso is shrinking. You're now making, if we close down the golf course or something like that, basically it's only you can only go play golf if you have money, basically.
Yeah, better field so
And-
volume would be more important than cost, right? Increase the volume, not the. cost of.
We can bring it back in a way that shows, I mean, obviously the extreme, I mean, I wasn't thinking of bringing back the extreme of completely closing the golf course, but if we, did not have to maintain the acreage and, the use of the Delta 9, what does that look like? And, we'd still would have some utility costs, because I don't imagine you'd let, your park go,
But there's a
dead.
fixed cost,
but there's some reductions we could make. And there may be other things that we can look at as far as how we're running that. One of the things we're going out for bid right now in the concessionaire, that can make a big difference.
And I've also, excuse me, I've already had some calls on people that are interested in that. And our goal is to break even. That's our goal. Not to make money, but to break even.
Right, it's not, the intent is never,
Like
like
a park.
community parks are not a money maker. But the more your costs you can cover, that's great. And when there's, the community I came from, we ran a golf course, we ran it like an enterprise fund, but it wasn't paying for itself. But it wasn't losing such a large amount. And that's generally what you see. We do know golf is generally a sport that has lost interest over the years. But for us, as that's happened, we've seen a slight increase in use of our facility for it.
But when
So,
you did the presentation on the other golf course, Escalante was the only one that had an increase.
Well, I mean, you can't even get a tee time until 11 a.m. on the weekends.
So it's getting there.
It's, I mean,
You'll be interested on the figures, because I can't believe that they haven't gone up. I'm gonna be surprised.
So do you have the actual?
So the actual revenue this year, is probably gonna hit 868,000. The revenue estimate for next year is 802,000. So I'm gonna say the estimate, based off of where this year is gonna finish, it's about 7% soft.
7% in the red.
well, no,
Well,
we
no,
think
no.
that it's underestimated.
Yeah,
I
because-
do.
And then I gave you the whole budget number, so the budget of 2 million, I've got to look at that historical. If we have 5% left over from salary, so that's the budgeted figure. So the budgeted loss is 1.2. The actuals, maybe a little bit less than that, because the revenues will be higher. The expenses will not be all expended. Our single largest change in expenses, and I'm gonna go back way back. I think the closest we've ever been to breaking even was in the 90s. We were probably the closest we ever got was within about 100 grand. But that's back when the golf course was running this about 1.1 million per run. But that's 20 some odd years ago. The largest direct cost has been water. The water, what we paid then and now is just massively different. And we use the purple water as well. And that's spiked up quite a bit.
I mean, personally, it's just, like I said, I think it sends a very poor message to the community. And the reason why golf courses across the country are closing is just because of their significant expense. But, I recognize it's been around for a while. It may be the cheapest golf course in town, but when you look at the actual numbers of people who use that facility, it's very small. I mean, the number of memberships there, like I said, it's probably in the hundreds.
yeah, but memberships is not a fair assessment of the number of people that actually use it.
It's the
So-
round.
Yeah, you have member rounds and you have general public rounds, but I think a thorough assessment is certainly warranted. I know our parks director has got some proposed and suggested future possible changes to.
Yeah, and we're lacking things that attract, like we don't have a place to, when the tournament finishes, it's at the restaurant, and it's really difficult. And so, we really haven't made the investments to see if we can, but I think as is, like I said, I've been hearing a lot of tournaments coming back from Fort Bliss. One of the things that stopped them from coming is that a lot of them, for example, the big one is Fiesta de las Flores. They do a big one, they're very successful, but they like to bring El Paso Community College culinary. And under our contract, they can't bring food from the outside. So Budweiser, for example, always donates beer, but we can't because our contract says that we can't bring beer. So you're not running it like your
Right.
typical golf course because of that kinds of, and in Fort Bliss, you can bring your own beer, you can bring food, you can, so that's very competitive. So that vendor contract, I think, is gonna be a key as to how we do it. I mean, like a percentage could be, you know, if you bring your beer, you still have to pay a fee or a percentage or, but that would attract a lot of, I think it's the only one I see that's sort of growing. Even Butterfield, I mean, they're great at the weekend, but I don't know, I think we have some potential there. The 9, the only thing people talk about there is that the first tee uses it, so it keeps the kids away from the major golf course. And they love the fact that they can play out the 9 and you got all the kids running around, like a playground kind of thing, and it doesn't mess
Doesn't interfere with the golf.
with the 18, and so that's the other thing. I don't know if we put some attention on first tee. They pretty much have done it on their own kind of thing, and it's very, very successful.
We have a contract with them.
It gets 60, 70 kids show up on weekends, and it's really a nice thing. So I don't know, like you're right, let's sort of assess it completely
And I think, Judge, Commissioner, I think the next 2 or 3 years are gonna be very telling because of all the improvements that I've seen out there. And we're talking about signage that's going to, in my opinion, attract a lot more attention to the entire park.
But I just think we have to take an honest assessment. And I mean, if it's not going in the right direction in 3 years, I mean, to me, it becomes very difficult to justify that we've probably spent tens of millions of dollars over the past several years for golf. And, you know, as we look at, you know, what are our core functions and, you know, again, that we don't provide some basic, you know, there's still communities in our area that don't have access to parks. We subsidize golf to that expense. It's something we just really have to evaluate.
Right, we could have built multiple all abilities playgrounds. We could have built several outlying library programs. You know, with what we've lost in golf.
But you know, the other thing, Betsy, is that when I've talked to people, when we do all these other things, it's gonna be a collateral kind of part of the puzzle.
Right.
And as you're gonna bring the boating and you're gonna, hopefully we could have retail or, I mean, all these things that we've been thinking about, the golf course then becomes a collateral support to that. And you know, when I talked to Judge Wolf, he was like fascinated that we had a lake and a golf course, and how are we gonna play that to make the whole thing function? So I think we're gonna see, I mean, if you could consider that as well, not just sort of isolated, but how does it impact the overall, what we're trying to accomplish? That people can go play golf and then they can have their kids could be at the, you know, elsewhere and the playgrounds, and so that he was more like, why, how are you gonna put this all together? Was his excitement? How do you know, make it all work? I mean, of course he wanted housing. He thought housing would be, but now that we know that we could cut through the neighborhood and into that area, that might be another growth spurt. I mean, I know it's a little bit out of left field, but if that area where the neighborhood has access to the park, the next step would be people might wanna, another middle class people might wanna buy there because they could use a cart to go in and play golf like you do in a country club kind of environment without the cost. So I don't know, just I think it's gonna play into, but I think what Commissioner Pettis is saying is let's not keep dreaming on it if it doesn't work. But I would encourage that, and I'll help with this because I have a good relationship with the Escalate Association, that we tell them, if these things don't improve, let me tell you right now, we're not going to be able to sustain this.
But we don't do any advertising for it. We don't do
Just
any.
on its own.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you can't really expect.
Yeah. But I think that we went to them and said, hey, look, this is our situation. We got about 3 years to prove this is going to work. What can you do? I mean, there's the other golf courses even have quinceañeras on the side of the golf course. I mean, I mean, they're very creative and like, you know, like Commissioner Stout said, I mean, no, we're not advertising, we're not doing, you know, the things that most golf courses do. And it's a good golf course, I mean, people are bragging on it now.
A couple, just a few other things. One thing I was thinking last night when we were allocating funds to the mass shooting incident, or how much was allocated to them?
$500,000 this year.
I got asked this by media yesterday. What I know the number was thrown out there as a very rough estimate, and you used some old case.
Right,
So
$5 million.
But the 5 million was the number that was thrown out there, right? Okay. But
No, for the case itself. It's
Yeah,
$5
yeah,
million.
yeah.
For the case.
For the legal.
the 8 million.
The legal part of it,
So,
and the change of venue where I think it's gonna,
right, the change of venue, that expense. Some of the other, expenses are the ME's office, the sheriff's office response, constables,
So what I was hoping is, well, one, I wanted to make sure that we're setting aside enough, I guess, for that. I know it's something that you mentioned that we'd have to talk about next budget year, but again, just considering our limitations, and I was hoping that at some point, maybe as we wrap up, if you could, you know, give us again what are, you know, what costs are we already going to expect next year, you know, given the limitations of the 3.5% cap. But whether or not that is enough to be setting aside for, you know, for what we expect to be a pretty significant cost. And I was just wondering if it might be wise to set aside more just in the event of that.
Betsy, can the DA speculate kind of, this was what happened the first year that we think, and this is what the cost is, and I think the second year would be, because it might be 7 years or 8 years or 10 years out.
and it's my understanding that the DA doesn't believe it'll go that far out, but we could ask him as part of an overall presentation to come discuss that. We also, we're very actively pursuing the various grants, and some of the grants come in fast. Some of the grants though, will take some time. And one of the ones that's like, for example, the governor's office has been clear about the funding that he's allocated, that it will not cover the defense.
The 5 million?
On a good note, Bill Cox came down yesterday at the end of the day and told me that he's been in close communication with TIEC, and they generally have something in the area of $150,000 to $300,000. He says, but this is an extenuating circumstance. The TIEC group is aware of the impact to this community and do everything in their power to, you know, see how much they can help us with it. So they're actually they're on board, and we're moving in a good direction.
Well, I just want to be certain that we're absolutely prepared for that. I mean, this was a major national event. It's a major national tragedy. Obviously, everybody knows this, but you know, there's this. It's unfortunately it's going to linger with this prosecution, which is, you know, very unique, where we have, you know, the active shooter that actually survived this incident. So, you know, the criminal justice process is going to be something that we just need to be actively prepared for.
I think something we could do additionally as our team works with the various departments and developing these estimates is if we see that we can flesh out something we think might be more material for FY 2020 between now and September 9th when we adopt the budget, that ability to increase the contingency for this certainly would be an option at those hearings on the 9th. If we hear something that's significant enough to say, you know what, 500 is not enough, maybe it needs to be $1 million.
Right. I just wanted to be sure that if we needed to, you know, I know it might be next year's budget, but I mean, there's no harm in setting aside some more now in anticipation of the high cost.
Right.
And then also finally, just throwing it out there, you know, there was talks at the city, you know, regarding this incident. You know, what makes it unique is that, you know, it was classified as an act of domestic terrorism. You know, it's something very hurtful, you know, that our community was deliberately targeted, you know, for issues of race. And so there's talks of doing a permanent memorial. And I think the county should be involved in that. And I, you know what, again, this is very, you know, I don't think anybody's talked about this, but it's very preliminary. But I think as the community heals, I think, you know, the city set aside some funding, and I think we should probably do the same as well. Because I think part of the important part of this healing process, considering the unique nature of it, that it was an act of domestic terrorism, given the racial aspect of it, I do think that a very nicely designed memorial would not only bring you know, comfort to the victims, but also I think would be an important symbol to our community as we heal about, you know, the values of this community, you know, the healing and you know, the need for peace, and so I think that, you know, having a well-designed and well-done memorial that honors the victims, but also sends a message to, you know, future generations of El Pasoans that we came together, you know, to, you know, combat, you know, the hate and you know, this terrible incident. I think is something that we should definitely be a part of.
We talked, my staff, and we talked that one of the things that we could do is do smaller things as well. For example, one of the ideas was, you know, the walkway on Escarate, how nice it is. Way in the days I had, to one of the commissioners, I had said, well, why don't we put the families of everyone who died in Vietnam to put a you know, sort of like a pedestal and then a story, so people could be walking. So that same concept, I was thinking if we were to put a pedestal as in that walkway of each of the 22 that you could go and read about them and their life. You know, they went to Franklin. You know, they whatever nice stories. So it would hit the health part of people having a place to walk. But if we could separate those 22 along that left side of the lake. And then we could get the families, either, not the families to pay, but I think there's enough associations that would pay for it. I think I figured at that time it was like $250 per pedestal, but now you almost have a pedestal in between the railing, and then we would be able to read so do something like that, you know, like a lot of different things. We thought of the wall we did for the veterans, to do something similar and make this area more of an area of recognition, and make a similar wall with their pictures, but on that wall, it's those, like a lot of small things. And then, because I think that the memorial concept of a lot of money in one place, I think we have so many facilities that we could figure out creative ways throughout our own facilities for us to be able to acknowledge it. You know, at the state of the county, my concept is very different about showcasing everything that we do versus putting statistics. That could be a place also that we could honor them there at the state of the county. So we're thinking, let's do a lot of different things going forward. And as I said at March, I mean, we're always looking for a grand slam, you know, or nothing. But I think within our own structure and our buildings, I think we could do a lot of different things. So anyway, that was our conversation.
How much is the city how much does the city put aside?
I don't know.
They're voting on it next week, I think.
On the amount.
I mean, I definitely think that we need to look at doing something like that. But if we're going to partner with the city, we need to really be careful about how it's done, and because to tell you the truth, for example, the memorial the other night was,
We were out of it.
well, we were not just out of it, but I mean, you had, you know, like Secretary McAleen in there, who's the head of, what is it, the head of CBP or Border Patrol, I can't remember which one, but you know, he was on the stage with Governor Abbott and the Lieutenant Governor, who, you know, have constantly, you know, I think been part of the problem that that we, you know, that we have that caused this attack. To tell you the truth, and I think that, I mean, it was not at all focused on the victims themselves. You know, the whole program was just a bunch of dignitaries speaking, and then 5 minutes at the end, saying the victims' names, I'm not sure that that's the type of,
We're very
approach
different
that
about
they would, that we wanna take. So if we're gonna be partnering with the city, we need to make it very clear that, that we want to have input and we need to make sure that it's not something that's,
My impression was it shouldn't be partner. I mean, I think we do things so differently, and I've learned.
well,
that-
either
Well, I
way, I
think
mean,
there's two
we could either partner with the
elements.
city or we could, or we could, do our own thing within our own facilities
Or both.
or both.
Well, I think there's going to be a broader, similar to the way that the community foundations come together. I'm just, again, this is very preliminary and very early, but it might come up during this fiscal year. I mean, I suspect that some organization like the community foundation might come forward with a proposal and might just raise funds from various entities. I mean, it'd probably be a combination of public funding and private donations to, again, create a first-class memorial for this community that people from, all over would have a place to visit to honor the victims. But again, I just throw that out there very preliminary, is that's, I know that came up on the city's conversation towards the end of their budget conversations, and just wanted to see if there was any will to,
So-
How much are you proposing then?
I don't know, maybe something like 250,000 or something, but I would imagine that at some point, again, given the national implications of this tragedy, I think, getting a professionally designed memorial or something will come around, but just,
So, I would propose that we use our penny capital fund for that. And the other thing I would tell you, so, a couple things. Internally, we have, victims advocates in both the DA's office and the sheriff's office who have been closely involved with the victims of this incident. We also have, our medical examiner staff who's been in very close contacts with the victims' families.
UMC has two.
And UMC has too. And I will tell you, just in my conversations with the medical examiner's office, one of the things that I think we could do to help our own employees heal is to involve them in the side of what the county does. Not, maybe whether it's in
That's a great idea.
like the, what we do with the community, but like, and I will tell you, every time I turn around, like my goodies yesterday from ITD, where they were having bake sales to raise funds to donate to the victims. JPD selling T-shirts, others department, everybody is doing something.
But-
And so if we did something internally, and maybe, I think some employees want to give to something like a
Have the
memorial.
option.
And maybe we say, the county's gonna we identify a few things that the county's gonna do, maybe one bigger thing, and then we make some smaller things. The golf course, by the way, wants to have a tournament to raise funding for something to respond to this incident. But we could possibly set aside our funding from the county, and employees may wanna help subsidize that in various ways to have something, and I think it would be part of the healing for our own, especially, and I'm sure the sheriff's office and the medical examiners, that, I keep thinking, and I've told them, I want some way to thank you all. And to them, the best way to do that is to do something, they wanna be part of doing something for the families and the victims.
And to keep it,
No, sorry.
real quick, I'm sorry. We have a victims memorial that we honor on a yearly basis, the DA's office. It's over in the valley, over at Yarborough and San Paulo, in that area, that possibly, because those are certainly victims, we can incorporate it into that same, but there's a lot of possibilities.
We could. I think they deserve, besides, I think they're the medical examiners, like I said, a lot of small things. I think they deserve a plaque there to say on August the 3rd, this department was instrumental, or something that they could see there for themselves outside the building, a nice plaque like that. So I think I love your idea of getting maybe some county employees to become sort of like the advisory board for their departments. That's a great idea because now it's coming from them. And they
And-
feel like, what can I do? And they're
And they've
all
actually
stuck.
researched it. They go, our investigators, I'm very proud of them. They're all certified or almost certified. I think we may have one person left, a newer hire. Or they may all be certified now. But they've actually trained on, they have training and education on victims memorials. So, I definitely think the more we tap into our own team and our resources, there's a lot to gain from it. But also I don't think the court, Commissioner Stout, I hear your comments, but I will say, the city has been inclusive with us as far as including us in the resiliency plan moving forward, including us in the debriefings. And the plan moving forward and they're creating the various groups to address various issues that will continue. And part of the discussion was the memorial, and involving creating a committee, not just of city employees or city staff.
I would just like to clarify, I think it's more the OEM that included us than the city.
Sure.
Like, because as you noticed, when we were there, we didn't get recognized until the chief got up and acknowledged me. But other than that, we weren't even acknowledged again. So I think we have to be more assertive now as to, we're gonna play in that role, we're gonna
Right.
play in that sandbox, but now we're gonna have expectations
Yes,
of
sir.
what we're gonna do.
My point was just that I don't think we want to cut ourselves
No,
off.
no. But I think we have to
Assert.
negotiate better
Sure.
in our position, not like,
Yes,
hey, you
sir.
guys jump in here and we're gonna take the ball and then this is what you guys are gonna do, which happened at our medical examiners weren't acknowledged, the sheriffs weren't acknowledged, I don't know about Sheriff Wiles, I don't know if he got invited, the constable, nobody. So it was a city deal, and we've never been like that. Every time I stand up, I always say we have a great relationship with the city, I'm working close with them. I never have heard say the county. And so we just have to establish it. I think in our meeting between you and I, with them.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that McAleenan had a seat up there and for example, our chief medical examiner
Yeah, it was
didn't
not
get any
there.
recognition, it's just like,
It's
It's
too
disgusting.
random. It was too random. One speaker, like we've said from Mexico, get rid of the speeches and focus on the victims. And I'm not saying, what I'm saying, if we had been participating, we would have done it very different. And I think we would have hit home a little bit more. So I think if they're not going to allow us to inculcate our own philosophical premise of how we reach people, then we have to think on our own. But you're right, we're not gonna cut it off, but we're gonna assess.
and even in the future, I mean, it's gonna be, our DA who's gonna be prosecuting.
And-
And it's gonna be, we're gonna be the one, the county is gonna spend
Who did
all of
that?
the money to take care of the legal process.
Well, the work that they did during the DA and investigation and all that, that was never recognized. It was like, had nothing to do with this whole thing, so,
And I know our teams don't do it for the recognition,
no,
but we want them recognized. We're so proud of them. And asserting ourselves we do need to speak up. I will say part of it is, like, you don't think of what another agency's role is sometimes. Like, when we were at the meeting and I brought up, they were talking about the first responders group. And I said, I feel like the DA's office is just as much part of the first responders group because they're gonna be as exposed to it as the first responders were. So it's not that they were like purposely excluding them, they don't think of that.
Mhm.
And we do have to speak up and make them aware of it.
It's up to us to,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Spatza, if you wanna.
Well, you might have moved on, but you have been talking about the Victims Memorial. So just so you're aware, we have a Victims Memorial. It's at the Memorial Reading Garden, right off of Yarborough, just south of the library there, the Jets Marcus Library.
You do a march every year.
We do a march every year.
Leon had brought
So,
up.
so if you're thinking of doing something, let me just give you what our situation is. So there are approximately there's over 1,500 names on the memorial. And every year we inscribe the people that we lose in a calendar year. So this year, the 22 will be part of, right? There'll be more than 22 on the wall that we'll add. But if you've ever been to the memorial, we are we're run out of space. It's a really attractive memorial. The city was very gracious to donate the land to make that memorial reading garden. And they also are the ones who put what we use now to put the names on. And it's really nice. And so we always honor those people by mentioning their names every year, and we ring the bell in their honor. So we do that in April. And so if you are thinking of doing something, and I know there's multiple projects, I would just tell you on behalf of not just the 22 victims, but the other victims of crime in this community, we are trying to come up with a alternative to the memorial, maybe alongside on that piece of land, where we could start to add the additional names, because unfortunately we will have names in the future. So we've been doing that, and that might be something you would want to look into. I think you have to either you probably engage an artist, somebody who knows these things, look at the land that you have, collaborate with the city, and it could be to honor the 22 and the injured and who are suffered from 2 weeks ago. But it also, I think it would be just on my behalf, I think, a great legacy if you had another memorial, but where they would share all those victims, their pain, their suffering, survivors. We all share it
With
others. And so I don't know if you have to have just 22. And if somebody else is doing something, then let that happen. But in that area, which frankly we consider pretty hallowed ground, those are the names of victims of crime that we've lost in the last years, as many as we can account for. And so like this year, we will not, I think we will have space for the 22 and whoever else we have to add. But years to come, that may be much more difficult.
Is there an option? I know you said I was gonna ask, but then you said it's sort of like sacred ground now, but would there ever be an option to move the action memorial to a very, like Escárate or something that we could really expand, that it would be in our county, that would that be difficult to do?
That's a good question. I've never thought of doing that. I think we're one of the only communities that have the memorial dedicated to victims of crime in an area close to town, right? Escárate Park would have been a great place, but we've been there. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what I think about moving it. I like that it's a really nice place. The Escárate would have been a great place, but the way this is situated, it is a reading garden, and the reason it's called a reading garden, it's a little bit below the level of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicle traffic. So there is some quiet. There is some peace there. And, right from the beginning, we had a little bit of graffiti issue, but we haven't had that in years. And it's nice.
It's a beautiful
nice.
event.
Yeah.
The event you actually put on is amazing.
The other thing that you might consider that we're still planning, and now because of 2 weeks ago, we always have a victims march in October, late October. So we'll do that again, but now we're thinking it's going to be many more people will come. We always provide anybody who walks, we always provide them with a t-shirt. And so that's something else the county could participate in. It's a 10-mile walk. It's from here to the Memorial Reading Garden. We have a few speeches at the end and then we're done. But I think it's going to be much more meaningful this November. We're trying to coordinate with who we can bring in so that, we can, remember not the 22, but the other victims of crime. So you could consider doing something there. But we will still continue to do both those events. We just think that each one, I think this year is going to be much more well attended than in the past.
So,
Right,
it was
so-
well attended last time.
Right, and I'm not sure exactly how that happens. Certainly, we've considered reaching out to the foundation. That might be something, because the community could get behind that. So we're working on that as we speak, so that we can figure out how to coordinate that. Right, I wasn't sure if you were aware, we already have those, and we should incorporate that. If they want to have a memorial, which I'm not saying is, I think that's appropriate, but there are those that you have an existing crime victims memorial, which doesn't mean you can't have something special, but that memorial does need to be upgraded. All right. And we haven't figured out yet a way to add to the memorial. One of the ideas has been to consider a kiosk, where you could put the names. I am not a fan of that idea. Really, if you look at that memorial, some artist from Seattle, Oregon, somewhere out there, won the competition, and the city placed it there, and it's really nice. I mean, I'm not sure. Steve Ortega was the one that helped us do that. I'm not sure the city's gotten enough recognition for donating that park, right, between that and Yucca Park, and it's a good place.
We were talking earlier that we have so many already existing opportunities. I hadn't thought of that one, but we were thinking we have our own buildings, we have, that we might use our own infrastructure to do what we need to do for the victims. But that's a great idea. I forgot, there are gonna be part of that.
Yeah, my concern is, so right now we're working with the victims, and there's a lot of help now. You have to consider down the road, where will the help be in 6 months? And where will it be in a year? That's what you have to think about, right? I mean, we're here for the long haul. You all are here for the long haul, but you have to consider that. Right now, it's massive, and it's good, and it's great,
But it'll fade out.
but yeah, so just something to think about. I just listening downstairs, I just wanted to remind you.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, if there was a way, changing the subject a little bit, about the cost of what it's gonna cost for the trial of the shooter and all that, if there was a way to project, at least to some extent, like what happens the first year, what's the cost there, what happens, or is that too vague to be able to put a budget?
Both for the prosecution and the defense side.
Yeah, it's I can't tell you what the defense what their cost would be. We projected in an afternoon what we thought. It's really hard to tell. We're working the case now. Depending on when we indict, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we, depending on the situation, the judge, and so forth. I mean, we could go to trial next year. That would be my hope. It just depends, right? I don't know. It's too hard. We are working together with the U.S. Attorney's Office, so there's that collaboration, and they have their own effort. We have our own effort. Both of us, both the state and both the DA's office and the U.S. Attorney's Office can prosecute separately. There's not a double jeopardy issue that may occur. But we're moving forward, and I know the U.S. Attorney, they've been very helpful to us, the FBI, like the SO and the PD and the DPS, they've all been helpful. It's very hard to speculate at that, right? I mean, like how many witnesses would be called?
It's a lot of
It's a lot of moving parts right now for us. I mean, I'm glad you referenced the DA's office. We were, from the moment of the shooting, when the Family Assistance Center, what was it called? The Reunification Center. We had advocates there, and we have, I have had a therapist talk to not just my staff last week, but also specifically to my advocates. We met this morning. We always, every first Friday, we have a meeting where they get donuts or meat, and we talk about issues. So we don't know. But we met this morning. We're going to meet every Friday for a while, just because it has affected the office. And so we're discussing that. But you're right, it has affected.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you this because I think it's a good idea. We happen to have scheduled an active shooter training. This was before 2 weeks ago. So we just went ahead and did it. You probably should do that. It's something to think about.
We have them scheduled.
Yeah, it's an eye opener in this atmosphere. It's a little tense, but it's you should at least, I think it's a smart thing. We did that yesterday, and we have there's a repeat class today at noon for those in the office who could not attend.
Well, that's excellent.
Okay.
We're thinking not a lot of pressure, but I was wondering if you could take care of everything before you leave your term. I mean, I don't know. Get the trial done.
It would be great if that could happen. But
we'd love to have you as part of it, so.
it would be great, but look, it's really, there's just a lot of moving parts here. And there's a defense, and there's a judge, and there's just a lot of moving parts.
And then the change of venue, that's a possibility.
Right.
And
all that.
It's a lot.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, but keep that in mind. You have a memorial reading guard.
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Jaime, before you leave, can I talk to you about one thing? And then, while I'm talking to the DA real quick about something else, there was a follow-up request about an issue Commissioner Stout had that I was gonna ask Melissa to address regarding the sheriff's office and feminine products for the inmates.
Okay.
Just to update the court. I'll be ready.
Thank you.
I was wondering what you wanted me to do. So good morning, Commissioners. Judge Melissa Carrillo with Human Resources. Commissioner, you recently brought up something, and I'm pulling up my information now. You brought up something recently regarding the new legislature requiring feminine products and ensuring that we're dispersing those appropriately at the right levels to our women in our jails.
Not just dispersing them, but making sure that they're not having to pay for it.
Yes, sir. And so I did verify with the Sheriff's Office, and in accordance with House Bill 2169, they're requiring that they don't have to pay for them. We were already meeting those standards before the legislature passed. And so I did verify women do not need to pay for any of those products, and it was very clear they do not. They're provided to them.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wally, are we still having to do the capital fund?
No, capital fund is done. The only thing is the court wanted to allocate an amount out of CIP for possible memorial for victims.
So what you're suggesting 258K?
Yeah, and again, I know it's really preliminary, but like I said, I suspect there's going to be a community conversation at some point.
Wouldn't affect, like I said, the bottom line fund balance. It would just be an allocation we would make as a means of this process for future consideration.
Yeah.
By the consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like we got pretty much everything in the group.
And I'm leaving these pink because they're capital. So the three pinks you see on the screen are all out of our capital fund. So consider pink for me.
Okay.
And then you green is pink.
So where are we still needing some action?
Have a motion to instruct us to include everything that we've received direction on in the budget that's been presented to you through the last 2 weeks for preparation of the proposed budget and filing with your clerk and auditor for consideration of hearings on September 9th.
Is that an appropriate conditions? Not that I didn't trust you, but I so move.
Second.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Right.
Judge Samaniego?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So can you send us that as well as any updates on the total?
Yes, you will all
Total budget.
You will all get the register resulting from today's meeting, and then once we go back and do all the movements that you've authorized and instructed us to do, you'll be getting a complete packet. Those packets will be in Excel format. You'll get summary and detail as well.
Okay, yeah, but summary just so we like when the media comes to the.
Yes, sir.
It's not my door.
With that.
We have item number 4, discuss and take appropriate action on the El Paso County Hospital District's capital and operating budgets for FY 2020 and proposed tax rate.
I think that was no action.
Okay, so no action for item number 4.
Item number 3 will also be no action.
Okay, item number 3 will also be a no action.
Is there anything else the court wants to discuss?
Even if you could just email it to us again, just where the costs, where we're gonna start off next year, or where you anticipate.
Yes, what already things that we know we're gonna add on to next year's budget.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do we have a schedule for next week? And since we've approved this, what comes next?
You have a public hearing on August 21st. You have a 5:30 meeting for the County of El Paso to receive, and this is just to receive views from the community, from both proponents and opponents of the proposed tax rate. That's at 5:30, followed by a meeting at 6 on the same day for the proposed tax rate for UMC.
When do we cut up all those names that,
You're gonna do it
You've
again?
already done that.
Done that? We did one more time? We've done that. We are actually putting the final touches on your elected official publication. We'll be giving that to the county judge's office today. Thereafter, Celeste will be notifying the elected officials. They'll have 5 days from the day they receive it to potentially agree if they so choose. If that's necessary, on Tuesday the 27th, the county judge would convene the meeting for the salary agreements committee. We've already gotten response from a significant portion of members this year. Doing it early helped out tremendously. Caesar put together a great package we've had the best response ever from these potential committee members.
I think we changed the letters on too.
We did.
The letter, the approach.
Caesar knocked it out of the park. Following week on August, I'm mixing up ours with PSD. I believe it's the 28th. That evening, we'll have a public hearing for the same county tax rate at 5:30, followed by the hospital at 6 p.m. Then we'll have Labor Day weekend. Following week will come in at September 9th. We will consider, you'll have a public hearing on the proposed budget presentation and by county administration in our office on that budget, followed by the adoption of the tax rate and the ensuing budget.
Are those on our calendars or?
There, I will make sure that they are.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
I know that a lot of work went into this. Wally, Betsy, everybody that's here. Melissa, a lot of weekends, a lot of nights that, the public only sees us here, but it takes, just to get here, took a lot of background, a lot of work, so thank you.
And great job. I think everything we asked you had. I mean, or you do it in 5 minutes. I don't know how you do that, but give us 5 minutes,
It's the people we have, the incredible members we have behind the team as well.
Yeah, no, we thank them. Hope they're hearing, and we thank, this is a great process, very professional. I've been in a lot of these, but this is my highlight. Just the support and the camaraderie, the way we do it, the way we handle it, the professionalism, I think has to be applauded. So, thank you.
And Ed, I didn't want to leave you out of that. I also express our thanks to you.
We're a
because
team.
It was a lot of
We do
work
whatever
done
we
that
need to
way.
do to get it done.
No, you're part of
Thank
the,
you.
you're a big part of the.
Same thing with my staff. They do whatever they need to help out. We're all a team here.
Thank you.
And it really helped us getting your feedback on things. We looked back when we started, as Wally mentioned, we're meeting on Monday to start getting ready for next year. And it really helps during the year when we get that definitive or some clearer direction from the court. It's very beneficial to us. It helps us know, okay, now we can move forward with this. I feel like we already have some budget direction, some pretty clear budget direction for next year, knowing what we face. So we'll already be able to start navigating and informing and working with departments. And, probably, all of our department heads and our elected officials are great partners. I can't thank Wally and Melissa enough because I was a really big bear this year about having that presentation and having the book, and we can't fail this. And 11th hour, I'm knocking on their doors, following them home.
Tell me what I can
whatever
bind. No, she's ready to roll up her sleeves and hop in with us.
So I really appreciate all of the teams, and especially Melissa and Wally and their work on this.
Well, I do want to thank the board and the collective group here in the room, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our collective teams behind us. They make it easier for us. This process changed a lot this year, and again, I'll reiterate, it's going to improve and give us a lot of efficiencies going forward. The book at the front end, now preparing the book at the back end, is going to be that much easier, but also that much better. So I'm very optimistic as to what we have to produce in the future. Certainly we have the challenges in the future. So we've got to roll up our collective sleeves and really look at how are we going to best prepare for, plan for, and with that goal of a sustainable, more sustainable, and moving towards that sustainable model in the future. That Senate Bill 2 challenges us, and we're ready to meet that challenge head on.
Judge, Commissioners, I don't want to harp too long, but I do want to echo on what's already been said. One of the things that was really eye-opening for me this past year is, as Wally said, our teams behind the scenes who work so hard. We've put together this calendar in the last few years that we really try to stick to, and every year we're like, dang it, we missed something, dang it, we missed something. But our teams worked really hard to meet those deadlines, and I think it helped to ensure that Betsy was always on the right path where her communication was with you. But one of the biggest things I saw was our team is really committed to data in general and performance metrics more than I've ever seen. Even our team, it's not just us talking it, it's not just us taking cue from you, it's our team behind the scenes saying, how does that connect to the top 10? What is the rest of the state doing? What are the metrics compared to them? And they're already thinking that way. And so when you see the transition of their expectations at that level, I think we've really transformed our organization, and I'm proud of that. In some of the conversations that I've had with other VPs of HR in Texas counties, to include Bear, to include other Texas counties, they've commended us. They've said, wow, you guys are way ahead of the game. We don't even use metrics when we're considering our budget. And that's huge. And so I know we talk metrics and we talk metrics. Years ago, departments would look at us and say, what do you mean? What do you want? And now it's just who we are. And so thank you for that direction, and thank you for taking us to the next level. We really do lead the state in so many ways, and I think budget's just one more way.
Thank you. Very appreciated.
Okay,
Is the food here, or should we keep
it'll
talking?
be here within a few minutes.
No, we're stalling.
Actually, can we,
Everybody say one nice thing about each other.
I will tell you, not to just lengthen or take too long. I've told the court this before, but I can't tell you enough how you set the tone for our whole organization. And even when you all disagree on something, you do it respectfully. You do it in a way that is professional, and that means a lot to us. We really appreciate it. It's humbling to work here. I'm very proud to work here, and it makes all of us proud because of the way you all behave. And so I really appreciate that. Sometimes I know the team jokes about me giving them the eyes, but sometimes I know when I meet with you all individually and we have emotions. Well, we have emotions running high, and I'll say something, they'll say, let's think about this, or you might want to consider this, and you all always stop and you think about it, and I really, really appreciate it. And our whole team and our organization really appreciate it. We have a great team at the county. I'm very, very proud of the whole organization.
Agreeing to disagree is one of the most powerful things that we could do, and I saw it through the whole process with your team and our team here. But we disagree, but we agree that it's okay.
Right.
It's not going to offend anybody, and I love the fact that we get away from here and we still have great relationships, and nobody holds a grudge on anything that we do. And in any corporation, when you make a decision, you make the decision, you trust the process, and then you all leave not saying, oh, well, I shouldn't have done this, or I was different, but hey, we made an agreement. And then we go out as a team, respecting that agreement that we made. How much more do we need to do little blurbs?
I think we're good.
Well, thank you, everybody. This is really nice. Erica and Jessica as well, thank you for keeping us moving forward and everything that you do to get us ready. And I know you got some.
Caesar.
Caesar, sorry. And then I know we've got.
Is your middle name Eric?
It will be from here on out. Trust me, it will be a good name. And, you're people that are back in the scene as well, making things happen here with our viewers. So thank you.
Yeah, Miguel and Alexis, they're never on the camera, but they really are the ones that make the camera work, so.
Shout out to you.
And even Christina Sanchez,
Oh,
our
that's
advisor.
right. Our county attorneys and our friends.
Yeah, one of these days, we really need to get the county attorney's desk a little nicer than,
Hey, she likes this.
It's all shaking.
But Lee was jealous of what she does
Yes, you
have.
can have
I leave you get a desk.
We don't want her to be too comfortable.
Right.
No, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
This concludes today's meeting at 11:39 a.m.